What creates the Emerald mood? What makes us a dynamic agency?
Well, several things.
Often what we do right from the start is approach projects in a cross-functional way, involving all areas of expertise.
What's the craziest team you've ever had to manage?
It was Accor, a project that lasted more than 1.5 years with a team of over 30 people.
Louis Vuitton, Chanel, I'm going to give you a little challenge. Can you make me an object from each brand? How far can pleasure go before pedagogy disappears? That's a question that all our clients have. Hello, I'm Virgil Loewe, the CEO of Emerald. And today I'm going to take you behind the scenes of the agency, because Emerald is not at all a creative agency like the others. You'll see there are lots of talented people, and we're going to show you everything we do on a daily basis, unfiltered. So come with me, follow me. But before we go talk to the team, I'm going to explain who we are. Emerald is a creative agency that develops immersive digital experiences for major corporations and luxury brands all over the world. We make training more fun through gamification, blending storytelling with premium 2D and 3D designs in an experience that is 100% custom designed in the DNA of our clients. We are a team of 50 people based in Paris, and we're going to meet them together. Follow me. So, like any agency, there are rushes, doubts, and constant questioning, and we're going to discover all of that. So, Colombe, you're a designer and illustrator at Emerald, and actually, once we have a storytelling concept, you'll create several graphic styles, several designs for a client. Louis Vuitton, Chanel, I'm going to give you a little challenge. Can you make me an object for each brand? And we try to see how we immerse ourselves in the client's DNA to visually convey something.
Absolutely, let's do it. So I've just finished the mood board. So we have one for Louis Vuitton and one for Chanel. As you can see, this allows me to quickly get a visual sense of their world, what their representative symbols are, and how we can actually translate that into a drawing. So there you go, the mood boards are done. And now, Virgil, what object do you want me to make?
Well, I'm a big fan of yachts, of boats. If you could make me a little motorboat, that would be great.
Absolutely, let's do it. We'll make that. For Vuitton, here we have a boat that's very luxurious. It's futuristic while still incorporating their signature codes. So here, for example, we have the little rivets that recall their iconic trunk, the checkerboard pattern, the colors. So here I've made several proposals. And then for Chanel, Virgil. I didn't make a motorboat, but I made a sailboat because, in my opinion, it fits better with Chanel's DNA. So we have the sails that feature their iconic tweed, we have their logo, of course, and then we have several color variations once again, because as we saw earlier, it's interesting to try different options to see what works best. So here are the two final proposals. Do you have a favorite, Virgil?
Both are really nice. I saw that you did a little watercolor style. I imagine that's to help visualize it. Then you're going to...
Yes, exactly. I started with a pretty sketchy watercolor style so we could get a quick idea. And then, as we saw earlier, the idea is to test several graphic styles on the drawing. So we'll be able to try out lots of other colors and lots of other things.
It's completely different. And I think the sailboat will be much more suitable. Well, a journey around the world to discover several destinations in a scenario more like this. But as for the tuna boat, I would have pictured it more in a port for a cruise parade. Ines, sorry to bother you. What creates the Emerald mood? What makes us a dynamic agency?
Well, several things. First of all, we do everything in-house. That means all our teams know each other. They've been working together for a long time. They've been working at Emerald for a long time. So we have a shared culture and there's never the same story twice. So we all know we have to be a bit agile and constantly renew our creativity. There's no off-the-shelf content. Everything is tailored to each client. Next, we have a little motto, which is to never say no to a client. And by that, we mean it doesn't necessarily mean letting everything slide or going beyond the scope, but it simply means that if we have a new challenge to tackle, something that will require innovation, R&D, brainstorming, we start from that principle, that all the wild ideas from our clients are our projects for tomorrow. Next, it's about exceeding client expectations. Not letting ourselves believe that just because the client likes it, it's necessarily the right solution. Maybe we can push the project even further. We really have this culture of not hesitating in a completely horizontal way to challenge each other again and again.
Hello, Laurent. You are a project manager at Emerald. What's the craziest team you've ever had to manage?
It was Accor, a project that lasted more than 1.5 years with a team of over 30 people. because we needed every area of expertise. We did almost 24 hours of learning with 6 brands for the Acqua group. So we needed motion designers, developers, game designers, a whole range of important professions to create these 24 hours of learning that lasted 1.5 years.
And you had at least 10 different professions in that team. How do you make sure they work well together, that they coordinate? It's
certainly important that communication flows well between everyone. So I hold daily meetings as much as possible, meetings to track progress. I do recaps, send messages, and so on. In every way necessary, depending on the person as well, the need to adapt to each individual.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Hello, Jamina. You are also a project manager at Emeraude. How do you create the storytelling from a client brief? And please don't give away all the secrets.
Of course. So first of all, the first thing I do is simply research the client, the brand, and the identity. Identify the signatures if there are any, especially with the Maisons. It's important to trace the history. Next, I also analyze the educational content, which is extremely important, and simply try to find the link between the two and tell a story. And also work on what we call the concept part, which means having the beginning of the storytelling. So point A to the story at the end, and how it completes both the storytelling and the end of the training from a box-ticking perspective.
Victor, our designer, is standing in front of all the characters from the latest games we've created. We've made an amazing mural, so we're going to ask him about the Emeraude touch, the signature style of our creative agency.
It's hard to define because at the same time, we're trying to capture the client's style. We're trying to immerse ourselves in their world. And at the same time, it's true that when we look at the projects we've done, there is a signature style. There are certain recurring references. For example, in 2D, we go for a sketch-like style inspired by fashion illustration and artist sketches. For 3D, the inspirations are a bit different, which we might explore more with 3D projects. That's not my area of expertise. I would say it's about showcasing the client's world with our inspirations and creativity.
It's true that our clients often tell us, oh yes, I saw a project and I immediately knew it was you. It's true that you can see it in the characters. These are completely different projects, yet you still find a bit of that same universe. So you've been at Emeraude for 4 years. How do you draw characters, make them inclusive, have lots of different poses? Because inevitably, in our experiences, they are in different places and they are the player guide.
Often what we do from the start is to consider projects in a cross-functional manner, involving all professions. So we need to brainstorm the project with motion designers, with project managers, even with developers. We end up working together quite a lot on poses, on files that could potentially be used in animation. Often we find ourselves with projects that really aim to showcase a pretty wild variety of situations and ethnicities. It's true that we have games that are multilingual, that are played all over the world. So the idea is really to work on different stagings, very different situations like sales or consulting. We're going to have different settings, advisors who will be adapted depending on the game we're making. In some projects, it's true that the question of inclusivity isn't always straightforward. And one solution we found, especially for certain 3D projects, is to have avatars that are unisex, gender neutral, that can represent anyone. You
can't tell whether it's a man or a woman.
Any player, male or female, can identify with them, and that's the most important thing.
Ines, may I bother you? You're in charge of supervising all the projects, so you see where the delays come from, etc. What advice could you give to a client? What are the most common mistakes made when creating an e-learning course?
The first is not having defined the decision-making process before starting. Who is the approver? Who are the stakeholders in this project? At the risk of realizing it too late and seeing work that the client has also invested in, not just the Emeraude teams, completely challenged when we're already near the end. That can be a rather unpleasant moment for our clients. The second point would be not having a clearly defined objective or content that isn't ready. Not ready or too much. If it's too broad, that can also be an issue that will slow down the project. And the third point is the client's involvement in a project. On our side, we're extremely flexible. A client might need to commit 30 minutes a week, 6 hours a week. It's up to them to give us some direction as well and to decide how they want to move forward with us. We're extremely proactive in order to move things forward as much as possible. As many things as possible, working on everything we call content mapping, starting from the raw source, sorting everything, prioritizing, making suggestions at that level, so on the content, on the storytelling, on creative ideas, on features we could push. But we shouldn't underestimate the fact that ultimately the final decision is in the client's hands. and we will always be there to support them, to offer solutions. But at the end of the day, we still need them to take a call that will be the final validation. What do we do?
Jade, what's the routine at Emerald? How does it work? From the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed?
Every day is different. It's true that we have a very diverse job, which means that no 2 days are alike, but we still have routines that gradually fall into place. We have the routine of really having team check-ins at the start of the day to truly share, also to see the obstacles that others might be facing and to really help each other out, helping across all departments. And then, of course, we also have a lot of meetings with clients. It's important for us to communicate with them regularly and to maintain that connection. Not just by email, really. Interaction is very important. We travel a lot as well, and they also come to see us. And of course, there's a lot of work around everything related to content and project creation, which is very 360 in the role of a project manager. It's also like solving puzzles. We also have a lot of exchanges with internal teams, with a lot of back and forth. And a day is really very busy, let's say, with a variety of tasks, which also means it's a job where you never get bored.
And we are part of the LVMH Maison des Startups. We were incubated this year. Can you tell me what that is? Every week you go to Station F, where there's a little LVMH hub. You also go to the headquarters on Avenue Montaigne regularly. We work with Dior, we work with Vuitton, we work with Bulgari, we work with Tag Heuer, we work with Sephora, Acqua di Parma, and many other brands in the group. So what's the routine with LVMH?
The routine with LVMH is really focused on communication. The goal is really for us to be in direct contact with the brands and to really exchange ideas, the processes, best practices on the learning side, which we fully master, and to provide solutions for their various challenges. So we participate in webinars, events, and we also go on site to meet the brands at their headquarters to really understand how they operate on a daily basis. And thanks to the Maison des Startups, it's truly a facilitator. And it also allows us to be visible ourselves and to also have visibility across the entire LVMH group, which is enormous. And it's a great opportunity for us to be among these 13 startups out of thousands of others who wanted to take part in this program. And so I regularly work closely with Selma, whom I want to thank again today for selecting us, as she allows us to be in direct contact with the learning directors to exchange ideas and to find solutions. It's also about R&D, concretely. It's really about brainstorming together as a team, figuring out how we can keep improving and finding new solutions. And for us as well, it helps us evolve tremendously and truly reinvent ourselves every day thanks to this.
We've done so many things within the group. We've carried out LMS migrations to 360 learning in-house. We've done product training, very retail focused. So in fact, it's about sharing all of this with other houses that might not be aware of everything we can do, really, to bring people together and create engagement within the teams. Thank you, Jade.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Johanna, you're a project manager with us. How far can fun go before pedagogy disappears? That's a question all our clients ask us.
So at Emerald, we start from the principle that if there is enjoyment, there is learning. The real enemy is actually boredom. So when we dare, we go explore and the learner will take ownership. In fact, with learning, they will discover and explore. And that's exactly when retention is at its best. So as long as there is enjoyment, learning accelerates.
And engagement, completion, retention, those are kind of the key words we focus on.
Exactly, that's right. All these concepts, when you take ownership of a learning experience, when you have fun, that's when you remember, you make the experience memorable, and you walk away with truly solid knowledge. So we use fairly specific game mechanics. It all depends on the themes, but we include immersive games, quests, and we also use badges, anything that can spark the learner's curiosity. And we make sure that right up to the end of the experience, they stay engaged and that for them, it truly is a memorable experience where they have fun in a smart way.
What's your craziest request ever?
We had a very large medical organization, which is one of our oldest clients at Emerald, who asked us to create a major immersive 3D training on the dangers of smoke in the operating room. So we could have made it something very serious, very medical, and ultimately expected. They allowed us to go very far with the scenarios, to suggest lots of ideas to them, both graphically and in terms of storytelling. And we went with a completely cinematic experience with superheroes and a villain who actually embodies these smokes. The players, who were basically super nurses with capes flying through the patient's airways to come and rescue them, to identify the particles. So there you have it. It was an incredible experience that had a huge impact. We got amazing feedback from the medical community, and that's when you really realize that where there is enjoyment, there is real retention, and that learning speeds up.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Thank you. Jean-Philippe, you've been doing instructional design for 20 years now. How are you going to turn 100 pages of a very technical document into a fun, engaging, and enjoyable experience?
So first of all, you have to take the time to discover and put yourself in the shoes of a complete beginner who knows absolutely nothing about the subject. So you start from scratch, you take your time to read, to understand, to do research. That is an essential phase. After that, I slow down, I take a moment to reflect. And I try to practice empathy, meaning I put myself in the shoes of the person who will be in front of their screen, who they are, whether they'll be stressed, whether they'll be in a hurry, and what exactly they'll need to learn with this format. So from there, we can imagine a scenario, because the goal isn't just to tell a story for the sake of telling a story. It's really about creating an experience for the user, getting them involved and setting them in motion. And then with the creatives, we bring them into the loop. And at that point, we don't just, not just a story, not just a training, but we create an experience that, if everything goes well, should transport the user.
Super cool. Thanks for your feedback.
You're welcome.
Hello, Aurélien. You are a UX UI designer at Emeraude. How are you going to make an interface visually accessible for someone who is 60 years old and not comfortable with technology, or for someone who is very comfortable and wants to have a bit more fun, like a 20-year-old? For example, someone who is very comfortable with technology. I'm not saying that people who are 60 aren't comfortable with it, but there you go. So how do you find that balance?
That's a good question, because I think what should bring them together is a very clear interface. We need to know where we're going, where to click, and what information we need to take in. So that's all about information hierarchy. So whether it's visual or textual, you need to know where exactly you should click. That's my job. So I work on that, and I put a lot of affordance into it. Moreover, I think you have to guide users throughout their journey without being patronizing. That means the hardcore gamer should feel just as comfortable as a casual player and without getting lost. And so that's really going to come into play. In detail, it's about gradually guiding the player as they become more comfortable, ensuring the hierarchy always remains the same and consistent, and occasionally, for the casual player, adding highlights so they don't feel lost. Quite simply.
So we're going to have really complex 3D and 2D designs that we'll be working on extensively. How are you going to manage to implement UX, UI, and interface in all that?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. How do you find the right balance between functionality and aesthetics? By the way, I say boundary, but I think it actually needs to be porous. They really need to blend together. Of course, navigation needs to be obvious, so you know where you're going, but it shouldn't pull you out of the established aesthetic, out of that universe. That's exactly it. It's a bit like a craftsman's work. It's really all about the details. And the visuals that accompany the navigation should almost be part of the navigation itself, really soaking into it. So it's truly detailed work.
Second to last step, the 3D team before the developers. So now we're going to meet Clémence, Amine, and Noémie, who are working on different projects. So Amine, can you introduce us? Well, our designs are always very wow. Let's just say that 3D is the most premium part at Emeraude. The characteristic, let's say, of Emeraude compared to other agencies, it's going to be real time, I would say. It's that here, we're not making an animation video. It's not a 3D model we're going to export. It's that you'll be able to move around directly in the environment, open doors, and have elements fall if you touch them.
Exactly. In fact, there's a very important technical aspect because we want to maximize interactivity with the 3D elements. That's why, as 3D designers, even though we're very creative, we work in collaboration with developers who make sure that everything is achievable in real time. And that will allow for interactions between the person using the system
And the 3D?
Amine, if I may, I'd like to ask Noémie a question. As a 3D designer, how do you manage frequent back and forth with clients? Rendering can take hours. So how do you plan for that?
We really anticipate it by getting to know the client better, meaning we also send the production steps. We don't go straight from point A to point Z right away. For example, we'll send rough drafts of a character or small sketches to see if we're heading in the right direction, if we're really meeting the request of the initial client. And then after that, we start getting into the details. Once we have approval, and also when we're in sync with the project manager, who also does her best to understand the client's needs. And depending on the client, we also immediately know where there might be some issues, the retakes, the feedback. We know what they're going to like or not. It's really very, very specific to each project as well.
Clémence, our wonderful Clémence, who is currently working on a chess game. Maybe you can tell us about the characters, since that's an essential aspect of 3D. We have to rig them, we're going to animate them, add textures. Can you tell us about first the 3D process and second about the characters?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, what's interesting in 3D is that what people don't realize is that you really start from scratch. Literally, when I'm going to make my character, I start from this. And then I start making iterations on my cube, like sculpting, like modeling, until I have a structure that looks like a model. And then, once we basically have the framework of our characters, we move on to the next step. What we call a rig, which is our puppet. Actually, if we were to speak in terms of puppetry, and that's what will allow us afterwards to make it so we can move our different characters. What? All of that? It's definitely really interesting to do. But when you don't do 3D, I think these aren't steps you would ever imagine. That's what makes it so time consuming. It's full of little steps that stack up on top of each other. Then you have to do the textures and so on and so on. And these are things that do indeed take a lot of time.
The final step in the process of creating Emerald is with the creative developers. They're all basically very different, goblins and so on. They all have different specialties, but they have one thing in common. They all master 3D. That is to say, they know how to develop and they master 3D because, of course, for real-time projects, you have to understand how to code in 3D. So the first question I'm going to ask Jerome, who is the most senior at Emerald, when do you say no to a client request? We
never say no. We mainly look at the request, we analyze it, we see how much time it will take, and we make a decision based on all that.
What is the most complex thing you've had to do on a project at Emerald?
It's not necessarily that it's complex, it's that it can be things we don't necessarily know, and that will require us to figure out how it works. And that's what's interesting, actually.
Okay, do you think you can get help from the whole team? By the way, with each skill to manage to handle the problems.
Of course. It's like we all come from different backgrounds, as you said. We all have different backgrounds, whether mathematical, physical, or creative. And everyone brings something to the table to build something together.
What's your specialty? Physics, mathematics, what would you say?
Somewhere between the two.
Benjamin, you were an apprentice with us for 2 years. Jerome, you even trained him. What was the project where you got the most enjoyment working as a developer?
I think it was a project where I worked alone for a long time. I was able to actually take the lead a bit on those projects. So for example, we had Lagardère, and then there was Rabanne and also Gucci Beauty, which were all very formative projects because I was the only one who had to manage the entire part, the development.
So Emmy, for you, you've been on the same project for 6 months now, but it's a huge project. That means you'll have multiplayer interfaces, you'll have 3D experiences, or where you'll have avatars that are controlled by AI. All of that makes it a huge project. How do you work on this project on a daily basis? What are the interesting challenges? Could you tell us a bit more about them?
One of the interesting challenges is ensuring cohesion between all the different scenes which operate quite differently. Some of them will really be in 3D, like you mentioned. Some will be almost entirely 2D questionnaires, so making sure there's cohesion between all of that as well.
Okay, that's really cool. Thank you very much. Jeremy, you've been working for a few months on an avatar project, a little character that's controlled by... In development, actually, and using AI, you have to sync the AI with the character in real time with 3D. Do you want to tell us about it?
It's a character. For a luxury brand, we'll need to make its emotions interact depending on the question, but it will also go further, for example, with multiple choice quizzes, where we'll be able to make it react based on correct or incorrect answers.
What are the main challenges? Making it as realistic as possible, I imagine?
The biggest challenge is that it's a project that only runs on mobile, and it absolutely has to be very well optimized because these are platforms that aren't very powerful. And since it's a site with a lot of luxury products, we have a lot of transparency, and that requires a lot of performance, so it really needs to be optimized.
Super cool, well done. Can't wait to see the results. So I'll finish with Stan, who has a very unusual background. You applied to our company and you did a really unique practical case. We were supposed to create a small 2D game, but you made it in 3D with a much stronger impact than anything we've seen before. Let's say you re-challenged our practical test for developers, and I think you also challenge a lot of things in general. The ideas from each dev here, what's great is that it also elevates everyone's ideas. It helps each person's ideas grow because we sometimes question things. Do you have any examples you could share with us?
Yes, of course. For Total Energy, for example, we just had a 3D game without any real interaction with the character. I wanted to suggest that we really make it fully playable, adding mini interactions to make the game more interactive and engaging rather than just having a basic quiz. To stimulate the user as much as possible, because I think that's a bit of the developer's strength, to suggest ideas at the end of the process that can really give the project a much more creative direction and add more of a personal touch.
So here we are at the end of this video. Thank you all for watching. You've had the chance to discover all the different professions at Emerald, the various stages of a project, and our typical routines in our office. Come meet us whenever you like. We organize events very regularly. What really makes Emerald unique is that we have all these professions under one roof, working together every day and able to create projects. Wow! And that's really the word. Wow, that's what we managed to achieve. We do this every day with our clients. So thank you very much and see you soon for what's next.